From the moment we're born, we're plunged into a carefully crafted system that shapes our perception and behavior without us even noticing. Most of what we think is real or true is actually a construct forced on us by invisible forces. Picture this. Everything you know, government, religion, the laws you follow, is part of an elaborate control system designed to mold your mind and life. This system doesn't operate out in the open. It works in the shadows, using symbols, rituals, and invisible norms to steer your actions in ways you barely perceive. These controlling forces aren't limited to some small group or single nation. They stretch across the globe, weaving a web of manipulation that governs the daily lives of millions, if not billions. And the wildest part? Most people don't even realize they're being influenced or manipulated. That's because the system's built to be invisible, like a smokescreen hiding how things really work. The truth is, every moment, we're being conditioned by forces that aren't on the surface of our reality, but buried deep in the collective subconscious. When you look at the world, what do you see? A political system, a financial market, cultural and social norms shaping your behavior. But the real question is, who's actually pulling the strings behind these structures? Behind every system, financial, political, religious, there are fundamental laws governing how things operate. These laws aren't openly discussed, because if they were common knowledge, they'd lose their grip. The control isn't in the obvious actions we see, but in the underlying structures keeping those actions in motion. And those structures are shielded by a veil of ignorance and distraction, keeping most people focused on petty issues, while the real mechanisms of control run unquestioned. The laws running the system aren't just about how things work. They shape the very perceptions and realities we hold about the world. Everything we've learned since childhood is designed to ensure we keep accepting the system as it is, without questioning its purpose or motives. But what if there's a system that, once understood, could dismantle this control and hand you back the power that's been taken? The first step to freedom is recognizing we're caught in a web of manipulation, and that only through knowledge can we break free. For those looking to understand these invisible forces, it takes an awakening, a wake-up call about what's really going on in our lives and the world around us. And that awakening starts with realizing reality isn't what it seems. What you think is your reality is actually a reflection of a much deeper, controlled system. By questioning and understanding the laws governing that system, you start unraveling the illusions and taking back control of your life. There are two fundamental laws, according to Jordan Maxwell, that form the backbone of all systems running the world, and their impact goes beyond politics or finance. They operate quietly, behind the scenes of our perception, shaping everything from government structures to our personal lives. These laws, though massively influential, stay largely unknown to most because, if they were widely understood, they'd upend the delicate balance holding society as we know it together. But once you start grasping them, you'll see how every part of your life is tied to them. The first is the law of the land, which governs customs, traditions, and the governance systems of specific regions. It's the foundation of what we consider society's natural laws. The law of the land reflects the behaviors, norms, and rights a community or nation adopts within a defined territory. It deals with regulating everything tangible, from land, ownership to citizenship rights, and mirrors our connection to the earth, nature, and physical life. But as crucial as the law of the land is, it's not the most far-reaching law governing the world. The second, and more powerful, is the law of the sea, or maritime law, which crosses borders and influences society on a global scale. Originally developed to regulate trade and navigation on international waters, over time it seeped into governmental and financial systems worldwide, creating a governance framework that impacts every economic and legal transaction on the planet. You probably don't notice it when you step into a courtroom, but when you're facing a judge or dealing with any legal issue, you're not just engaging with the law of the land, you're stepping into an arena ruled by the law of the sea. This shift from the law of the land to the law of the sea is more than a change in jurisdiction. It's a shift in how you're recognized in the system. When you enter a courtroom, for instance, you stop being a living, breathing person and become a legal entity, something governed by the maritime law system. This system is propped up by a vocabulary and symbols rooted deep in maritime trade. The term bank actually comes from the old merchant's bench, while bail ties back to the process of freeing a ship from port, a metaphor for releasing a person from legal custody. This system, invisible to most, forms the backbone of modern economies and societies, running way deeper than it seems at first glance. The laws of the land and sea aren't just legal abstractions. They're critical to how society and the global economy function. They create an invisible web of power that regulates how people interact with financial systems, governments, even their own legal identities. For example, when you're born, you're registered and tied to the global trade system, assigned documents that link you to the maritime law system from the jump. Understanding these two core laws, the law of the land and the law of the sea, is the first step to getting how the system works and, more importantly, how you can reclaim your sovereignty within it. True freedom starts when you recognize these laws and their role in your life. They're not just abstract concepts, but powerful forces shaping how you interact with the world. When you wake up to how these laws operate, you start seeing past the facade the systems put up, revealing the real power structures running your life. Ever stop to think about the power symbols have over how we see reality? From the moment we're born, we're dunked into a world packed with symbols that shape how we view and interact with it. But these symbols aren't just random images or simple visuals. According to Jordan Maxwell, they're carefully designed, tools meant to influence the subconscious, steering our thoughts and actions in ways we don't always clock. They operate deep in our psyche, shaping behaviors, beliefs, and decisions without us even noticing their impact. These symbols are everywhere. They pop up in corporate logos, national emblems, religious icons, even everyday objects. Take a big company's logo. It's not just branding, it's a symbol loaded with deeper meanings. Every line, curve, and color is intentionally picked to spark specific emotions and responses in your subconscious. The symbolism behind these logos and images often taps into ancient archetypes that vibe with the core principles governing the human mind. These symbols carry heavy messages, often hidden in plain sight, but with a deep impact on our attitudes and choices. A clear example is the shell logo, the oil giant, with its scallop shell, a symbol tied to ancient spiritual and trade practices. These symbols aren't just decorative. They've got a specific job, creating a subconscious link between the consumer and the product or idea being pushed. The emotional connection they trigger is deep, often stronger than any rational message we might get. That's because symbols don't speak to our logic. They hit our subconscious, where a lot of our decisions and behaviors really come from. But symbols don't just rule in the corporate or commercial world. Religion, for instance, is one of the biggest arenas where symbols carry weight and meaning. Religious symbolism can either lift spiritual awareness or be twisted to keep control over huge populations. How a religious symbol is presented and interpreted can shift how people behave, how they understand their own spirituality, even how they deal with authority. By manipulating religious symbols, those in power can, intentionally or not, keep the masses in a state of submission, reinforcing compliance and devotion without people fully grasping the mechanisms at play. The real key to freedom, though, lies in understanding and learning about the meaning and purpose of these symbols. When you get where these symbols come from, why they exist, and how they work on a psychological level, you start gaining control over your own mind and decisions. Becoming aware of the symbols around you lets you take charge of your perception, and by extension your behavior. You can start breaking free from their influence and reclaim your mental power. By understanding the impact of symbols, you also start seeing how they weave through every part of your life, from politics to advertising, even your view of the world and yourself. They're not just images, they're invisible control tools, designed to shape your perception of reality in ways you don't always notice. Learning about these symbols is the first step to breaking the cycle of manipulation and reclaiming your mental freedom. To really get how the global legal system works, you've got to unravel the relationship between the two laws running the world, the law of the land and the law of the sea. These two laws are the foundation propping up the political, social, and economic structures across the planet, and understanding Their dynamic reveals a ton about how modern society operates, often without people even realizing it. While they might seem separate or even at odds, these laws aren't isolated. They're interdependent, forming the bedrock of the systems of power, authority, and control we live under. The law of the land is tied to the rights, customs, and traditions that govern nations, setting rules for property, land, and relationships between citizens within a specific territory. It oversees the actions of a person or community in relation to the tangible, physical world. When we talk about laws covering property, contracts, civil rights, or local responsibilities, we're dealing with the law of the land. It's about territorial governance, reflecting the connection between individuals and the land they live. But when you step into a courtroom or tangle with any financial institution, you're not just vibing with the law of the land, you're actually stepping into the realm of the law of the sea, rooted in maritime law and international trade. Maritime law started out to regulate transactions and disputes in trade across waterways, but over time, its influence spread far beyond the seas, seeping into governmental, financial, and legal systems worldwide. That's because the law of the sea doesn't have geographic limits. It crosses borders, impacting everything from global financial transactions to courtroom proceedings that run on maritime law principles. When you walk into a courtroom, you're not just dealing with the law of the land, you're in the legal system of maritime law, which treats citizens as legal entities, not living, breathing humans, but as commodities or property. Take the word bank. It comes from the old merchant's bench where trade and exchange happened. Or bail, which traces back to maritime trade, where goods were released from one ship to another. This governance system is baked into the very words and symbols used in the legal system, where bank and bail aren't just metaphors, but carry deep legal and commercial weight. This interplay between the laws also explains why the global financial system flows like maritime trade. When you make a financial transaction, you're kind of participating in a trade governed by the law of the sea, where money and goods are treated as liquid commodities that move like water, transferred, shifted, and managed through a system way deeper than we realize. When a ship docks at a port and unloads its cargo, it's like the process of creating a legal identity for a person at birth when a birth certificate is issued, tying the individual to the maritime legal system and global trade. Getting this dynamic between the law of the land and the law of the sea is key to seeing how legal, financial, and political institutions are all connected and work together, even if no one taught you about it. Most of the time, we don't realize how much maritime law runs our daily lives. The gap between these two laws is what keeps most people in the dark, letting power systems operate without the pushback any society should naturally give. The key to understanding the real nature of our governance and freedom lies in grasping these two laws. When you start seeing how the law of the sea creeps into every corner of your life, your legal identity, your finances, even how you're treated in the justice system, you realize how much we're manipulated and controlled by these invisible forces. True freedom starts with understanding how these laws work and how you can break free from a system that sees you not as a living person, but as property in a global legal and financial machine. The law of the sea's impact stretches way beyond the legal system, digging deep into the financial world. At a core level, the global economy isn't just about swapping cash. It's a massive trade system regulated by maritime law's jurisdiction. This historical link between trade and maritime law isn't some small detail. It's the foundation the modern financial system was built on. When you dig into the roots of maritime trade, you start seeing how everyday financial moves, from buying a coffee to navigating global markets, are governed by an international trade logic that's way older and more powerful than any modern economic concept. Maritime law is a legal field that was originally created to regulate the exchange of goods between nations via sea trade routes. But as trade evolved and went global, maritime law grew too, shaping how economies function worldwide. You can see this in the financial lingo we still use today. Terms like liquid assets, cash flow, banks, even assets are deeply rooted in maritime law. The idea of liquidity, for instance, how easily an asset can be turned into cash, is a metaphor tied to maritime trade, where the flow of goods, money, and resources mirrors the movement of water, a steady stream regulated by super-specific laws. When you look at the banking system, the maritime law connection gets even clearer. The word bank itself comes from an old practice of merchants and bankers running transactions a lot like maritime trade deals. Banks are basically ports where money, as a liquid commodity, gets deposited, transferred, and docked for redistribution based on trade and the laws governing that flow. It's no accident that riverbanks and maritime trade routes are still used as metaphors in modern finance. Cash flow is a direct nod to how goods moved along sea routes, and money, as a commodity, follows the same principles. This idea that global finance is tied to maritime law reveals a key piece of the financial control system that most people don't clock. Trade under maritime law isn't just about simple business deals. It's about the constant movement of money and goods from one place to another. When you're born, you're automatically registered and become a commodity in this commercial system, with your birth certificate acting as a trade document, legally tying you to the global economic network. So you're treated not as a human with your own rights, but as a legal entity subject to trade and maritime law. This link between finance, trade, and maritime law is something few get, but it has a massive impact on your life. When you understand maritime law and how it applies to finance, you see that money isn't just currency or a value tool. It's a commodity controlled by a system of trade laws and regulations that operates invisibly, affecting every transaction and resource movement on the planet. This system, which started with commercial sea navigation, now runs through the entire global economy, keeping the flow of power and wealth in the same hands. To break free from this control structure, you've got to understand the system's nature and recognize its impact on your life. The real wake-up call comes when you see that the laws governing trade and finance aren't just about money, they're about control. Control over your actions, your identity, your power. By getting this deep connection between maritime law and finance, you start seeing how the system's designed to keep autonomy and control with a few, while the masses stay stuck in a cycle of consumption, debt, and financial submission. When you're born, you get an identity, a name, a number, a birth certificate. This process might seem normal, even trivial, but it's actually your entry into a legal and economic system that treats you not as a living human, but as a legal entity. The true nature of this system flies under most people's radar, but by understanding its roots, we can start questioning the real essence of our citizenship and identity. Are you truly free, or are you being treated as a commodity in a vast network of trade and control? Citizenship is often seen as a natural right, a status that lets you actively participate in a country's political, economic, and social life. But legally, citizenship isn't something you just get as a birthright. It's a legal property registered in the system. Your birth certificate isn't just a record of your arrival. It's the first document tying you to the global economic network, essentially a property title. The idea of being a citizen is a legal term reflecting a bond between you and the commercial legal system. You can be registered, like any commodity, in global trade. Throughout your life, your legal identity is shaped by this system. The name you think is your true identity is actually a legal construct tying you to the commercial system, creating a version of you that's treated as a legal object, not a human with freedom and autonomy. This partly explains why decisions about your life, from education to jobs to healthcare, often feel dictated by a system that doesn't care about your individuality, but your status in a global trade and legal framework. Your legal identity becomes the lens through which society views you, not your personal or human self. The term commodity might sound harsh or over the top, but it's an accurate description of how you're treated in the global legal system. Commercial laws, influenced by the law of the sea, treat people as tradable, negotiable assets. This reality is especially clear when you look at how the financial system works. You're literally a liquid asset in the global market. Your work, your property, your life are valued and controlled based on their worth in that market. This human commodity concept is key to understanding how the legal and economic system operates, but more importantly, it's critical to seeing how your freedom is restricted by this control. By grasping this aspect of citizenship and identity, you start realizing that true freedom isn't just the right to live in a territory or hold a passport, it's the power to break free from a system that constantly reduces you to a legal commodity. True personal sovereignty starts when you see that your legal identity doesn't define who you really are. Your identity as a human can't be boxed into a legal entity created by a trade system. Waking up to this reality is the first step to reclaiming your freedom and shaking off the chains the legal commercial system has slapped on you. The citizenship and legal identity you get at birth, while crucial to modern society's functioning, are constructs that don't reflect your true nature or autonomy. To achieve real freedom, you've got to see that these legal categories are part of a control system designed to keep you tied to a web of obligations, rules, and responsibilities that aren't yours, but that you're forced to accept. Freedom begins with understanding that you're not a legal commodity, but a human capable of transcending the limits imposed by a legal identity. Religion and commerce, at first glance, might seem like two separate spheres of human life, with different purposes and impacts. But a closer look reveals a deep connection between these structures, operating under the same laws and principles, both used to maintain control over the masses. According to Jordan Maxwell, religious institutions, just like corporations, use symbols, rituals, and dogmas to shape people's behavior, nudging them towards submission and obedience without them catching the true origin or intent of these controls. In many religious traditions, symbols and rituals have a subtle power to manipulate the human mind, leading people to believe they're on a spiritual path when, in reality, they're being guided by a control system designed to keep order and power in the hands of a few. These symbols often carry deep psychological weight, tapping into the subconscious and steering actions without people noticing the forces at play. For example, images of gods or sacred figures like the cross in Christianity or the crescent and star in Islam aren't just expressions of faith, they're symbolic tools designed to tie religious devotion to expected behaviors. Commerce works in a similar way, using symbols to shape desires, behaviors, and consumer decisions. A brand's logo, a product's name, or even its packaging are often symbols carefully crafted to create subconscious associations that influence how we view those products or companies. It's no coincidence that big corporations use symbols and archetypes rooted in the same traditions and mythologies that underpin religions. The endgame is always the same: keep the masses compliant, whether spiritually or economically. This connection between religion and commerce goes beyond symbols. The concept of salvation in religion can be seen as a kind of spiritual commodity, where followers are taught they need to follow specific rituals and doctrines to achieve salvation or enlightenment, much like consumers buy products chasing well-being or status. This dynamic puts religious and corporate institutions in a position of power, offering something people crave, whether a path to eternal life or a product promising a better lifestyle. The catch is, these promises often don't deliver, yet they keep people trapped in a cycle of unfulfilled desires, always waiting for the next fix. Plus, religious structures are often run by authority figures, just like commerce is managed by companies and corporations. Both use rigid dogmas and rules to ensure their followers or consumers stay loyal, meet their obligations, and, most importantly, keep funneling energy, whether financial or spiritual, back to those at the top of the pyramid. Religions and corporations aren't just about guiding behavior. They're power structures sustained by a constant cycle of worship and consumption. Ultimately, the real link between religion and commerce lies in their shared role. Both are control systems, built to keep the masses submissive and guided by the interests of a tiny elite. But just like in commerce, true freedom starts when you grasp the power of these systems and begin questioning their truths. Real spiritual awakening doesn't come from blindly following a system or dogma. It comes from breaking free of external control and chasing a deeper understanding of your own autonomy. Likewise, true economic freedom isn't found in stacking up more stuff or status, but in ditching the consumerist obsession that traps us in a cycle of manipulated desires. understanding the connection between religion and commerce is the first step to shaking off the chains of a system that uses us while keeping us from true freedom, both spiritually and materially. By unraveling these ties, you start seeing that the symbols and rituals around us aren't just control tools. They're chances to reclaim power over your own mind and life. The modern legal system, especially in courts, is a straight-up reflection of the law of the sea. When you step into a courtroom, you're not just facing a justice system, you're entering a legal marketplace ruled by the same laws that govern maritime trade. The link between courts and maritime law is more than symbolic. It's a deep connection that shapes how you're treated legally. The simple act of entering a courtroom with its lingo, rituals, and procedures is a shift from a land-based system to a maritime one, where you're treated not as a living human, but as a legal entity, a piece of commercial property. In many ways, walking into a courtroom is like stepping into a legal marketplace, where transactions and processes are driven by commercial rules, not the norms you'd expect from a society that values social justice or human rights. One of the clearest signs of this maritime trade connection is the language used in courts. Lawyers acting for clients talk about legal issues like they're haggling over property. The concept of bail, for instance, comes from maritime practices where a commodity or ship was released from a dock or port through payment. The same idea applies when someone posts bail to get out of legal custody. But in reality, it's not a person being freed, it's a legal entity. Judges, when they take their place in court, wear black robes, a color symbolically tied to Saturn, the ancient god of limitation and control. This symbolism isn't random. It's a reminder of the power the legal system holds over you, not just in terms of justice, but in curbing your personal freedom. Saturn, as a god of restriction, represents how the legal system keeps people locked within commercial and legal norms, where their rights are constantly overshadowed by global commerce and economic control. The concept of a bank also ties back to commercial transactions, where the original bank was a merchant's trading table for goods, directly linking the idea of money to a commodity. When you deposit money in a bank, you're essentially placing a commodity into a system governed by commercial and maritime laws. The global banking system follows these same rules, manipulating the flow of liquid assets like goods traded through ports. But the biggest deal here is recognizing your legal identity. In a courtroom, you're not seen as a human with rights, but as a legal entity, a stand-in for you that's treated like a judicial commodity, subject to laws and transactions that don't care about your basic human needs or rights. This shows up in the judicial process, where the judge acts as an authority figure, deciding what can be done with your commodity, you, based on commercial rules, not human principles of justice or natural rights. Seeing the courtroom as a marketplace run by the law of the sea lets you grasp the true nature of the control the legal system has over people. It's not a place for seeking justice, but a commercial space where commodities, people and their legal identities are traded, managed, and often trapped in an endless cycle of transactions that prop up established power structures. True freedom starts when you realize the system isn't here to protect your personal liberty, but to maintain the order of a commercial setup that views you as a commodity, not a free human. By getting this connection, you see that the judicial process isn't just about local laws, but a web of rules and rituals rooted in the law of the sea, operating globally to keep financial and legal control over society. Only by spotting these hidden forces can you start challenging the system and reclaiming your autonomy within a structure that treats you as a legal commodity instead of a human with real rights and freedom. We live in a world where power structures, both legal and economic, operate so subtly and invisibly that we barely notice how much we're controlled. The global control system, with its deep roots in the law of the sea, the law of the land, and the commercial norms running our lives, doesn't show itself outright. It doesn't demand obedience through raw force, but through subtle manipulation of our perceptions and behavior. That's the system's real trick. It doesn't need to be enforced directly. It works in the shadows, tweaking our collective consciousness invisibly while we stay distracted by trivial issues and daily noise. The system's built to keep people clueless about the real power mechanisms shaping the reality they live in. Instead of questioning the structures running our lives, we're led to believe the reality we're shown is the only one possible. The laws governing our society, how we handle justice, trade, politics, even our personal beliefs, have been shaped by a system that uses distractions and psychological manipulation to maintain the status quo. The very concept of freedom we're sold is often a lie, because we're only free within the limits the system allows. Institutions, government, religious, commercial, know exactly how to play us psychologically. Laws and rules aren't just imposed. They're woven into our beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors, creating the illusion we're making free choices when our options are actually limited and preset by a system controlling information and knowledge. When we talk about civil rights, for example, we rarely question the legal structures limiting those rights or where those laws come from. People have a false sense of freedom, thinking the legal system's there to protect them, when it's really about regulating and restricting choices, often without them noticing. Social control works the same way. From childhood, we're taught to follow rules, respect authority, and not question the system. This breeds a passive mindset where people become obedient and conformist, thinking they're just doing their civic or moral duty, not realizing these rules were designed not for collective well-being, but to keep the system's order intact. Big corporations, governments, even religions feed this dynamic, spinning a web of control where we're all in some way caught in the illusion of choice. But the control's real power is its invisibility. It's not a loud or violent system, but a psychological one, using symbols, words, and repetitive actions to craft a reality the masses accept. Most people never question it because it's designed to shape their perceptions from the start. From birth, we're conditioned to believe the reality we're shown is the only one. But when you start questioning its roots, you see the control system isn't just ruling us openly. It's shaping our perception of reality in deep, hidden ways. The biggest lie is thinking we can't change this system, that we're at its mercy, not seeing that the real key to freedom is in our consciousness and waking up to the control mechanisms. Once you understand how the system's built to keep you trapped, you realize liberation starts with knowledge. True freedom doesn't come from fighting the system head-on, but from understanding how it works, how it manipulates the masses' perception, and then consciously choosing to align with truth and break free from its invisible chains. To break this cycle, you've got to educate yourself, understand how control operates, and then question and challenge the narratives the system pushes. Only when you wake up to the forces working in the shadows can you start dismantling the illusions and see that true freedom and power are within your reach. But that takes opening your eyes and peeking behind the curtain. The journey to true freedom begins with a simple but profound awakening. Realizing the system running our lives isn't natural, but a constructed setup designed to keep the masses ignorant and controlled. Your whole life, you've been conditioned by external forces, symbols, and dogmas that shaped how you see yourself and the world. Most of this control has been invisible, keeping you stuck in a cycle of distraction, consumption, and conformity. But by questioning these forces and understanding how they work, you take the first step toward reclaiming your autonomy and personal power. Knowledge is the key to freedom. By understanding the laws governing not just the legal and economic systems, but the deeper forces shaping reality, you start seeing that the truth was always right in front of you. You were just blind to it. Every symbol, ritual, and belief system imposed on you has a hidden origin, a control purpose carefully orchestrated. But the awakening happens when you choose to dig beyond the surface, uncover the true roots of the power forced on us, and finally understand how these control structures can be torn down. Waking up to the truth means, above all, questioning everything. Question the narrative you've been fed, the laws you follow, the ideologies you've been taught, and realize that many of your decisions and beliefs have been shaped by external forces, not your own conscious choice. True power comes when you see that social, political, and economic structures aren't set in stone. They're human-made and can be changed, transformed, or even dismantled. And that transformation starts with reclaiming your personal power. This process isn't easy. It takes guts, persistence, and a willingness to face the truth. The system keeping people trapped in control and conformity is designed to be invisible, so most live their lives never noticing the force behind it all. That's what Maxwell calls the system's illusion. But by breaking that illusion, you start waking up to the reality that you have the power to change your life and even the world around you. Breaking free from the control system is an act of courage, a courage born from knowledge, education, and the will to challenge the imposed narrative. The journey to freedom also involves reclaiming collective consciousness. When you wake up to the truth, it's not just your life that changes, you start influencing the reality around you. What begins as an individual quest for liberation can inspire others to wake up too, creating a ripple effect of change that can spread through society. True freedom isn't something you achieve alone, but something realized when enough people start grasping the truth and challenging the power structures holding them down. To walk this path back to sovereignty, you've got to open your eyes to the manipulation around you and commit to ongoing education. This liberation journey demands a new perspective, a readiness to question everything you thought you knew about the world and yourself. It requires not just understanding the theory of control, but actively breaking free from distractions and seeking a deeper alignment with the universal truths governing reality. The process is ongoing, but the payoff is huge: true freedom and the power to create your own reality. Ultimately, the journey to freedom starts with a choice. Are you ready to challenge the system? Question the power structures running your life and reclaim your personal power? True freedom comes when you become aware of the system, understand the forces controlling it, and finally break free, living a life that's authentic and aligned with universal truths. The awakening is the first step to real transformation, and only then can you dismantle the illusions and build a life that's truly yours.